Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a wine from Saint Estephe. The wine is Chateau Beau Site and it's the 2016 vintage of that. Beau Site is another property owned by the Castéja family and managed through their business Borie-Manoux, and they very kindly supplied us with the sample for this for me to taste, so that's much appreciated. Beau Site sits pretty much at the north of Saint Estephe, which is the northernmost of the well-known communes of the Médoc. So we're on the left bank in Bordeaux, to the left of the Gironde Estuary. Beau Site is so named because it's a beautiful site. It sits on the top of a hill. It's slightly to the northeast of Chateau Beau-Site, well-known class growth of this area. And it looks down those hills towards the Gironde Estuary, so it's fairly well placed to be quite close to the water and its moderating influences. The other point about it being a Beau Site, a beautiful site, is its nice deep gravel sand soils. It has some limestone in the soils, and there's also a little bit of clay and marl. Originally in the 18th century, it started off as being part of an estate called Chateau Morin. It was separated from that. For a period from the 1850s through till 1920, it was known as Beau Site Grazian, under the ownership of the Grazian family, but in the 1920s they sold the estate and it reverted to the name Beau Site. It came into the Castéja family through their grandfather, Maurice Borie, so a connection with the Borie family, part of whom still own du Cru Bourgeois, the very famous second growth in Saint-Julien. That was in 1955. Unfortunately, Marcel only lived for another 6 years, and the estate was passed to Émile Castéja, who in turn passed it to his son Philippe, who is the current head of the family. The soils, being that sort of beautiful, deep, free-draining gravel predominantly, are largely planted to Cabernet Sauvignon. So the planting is about 70% Cabernet Sauvignon with 25% of Merlot, and the balance of that is made up, I think, with 3% Petit Verdot and 2% Cabernet Franc. Actually, in 2016, there's a little more Cabernet Sauvignon in the blend. I think it's 78%, and the proportion of Merlot is only 16%, with the balance being made up of 3% each of Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc. The vineyard is the estate is about 100 hectares. The vineyard is around about, maybe slightly below, but about 40 hectares in total. There's good vine age here, about 45 years on average. So some good concentrated fruit from old vines who naturally restrict yields. The wine ferments in a couple of vat rooms which are equipped with stainless steel tanks, which are temperature controlled. They have 27 of these tanks, so there's a good availability of tank space. There's no shortage of that. The wine ages for somewhere between about 12 and 14 months in French oak barriques, and depending on the vintage, that'll be about 40 to 50% new, with the balance being second and third fill oak barrels. I would assume for a property of this size they're doing the malolactic conversion in the tank before it goes into barrel. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? First thing to say, really nice deep colour. That is practically opaque, I can't see through it there. It's holding its colour well to the rim. It's a fairly sort of inky ruby red colour. As a swirl, there's not a particularly enormous viscosity. There appears to be some forming of tears, but only just. The wine's only 13.5% alcohol, so it's not it's not powerful in that way, and it's not hugely viscous. Look at the aromas first, shall we? The aromas display a rich, ripe fruit, but overlaying that is some savoury and spicy notes. And actually, this is a very typically Saint Estephe nose, because it's actually dominated by a somewhat sort of savoury, somewhat restrained, earthy note. There is some ripe red, dark red to black plum and pruny notes, that sort of quite high ripeness, red to black fruit. There are meaty notes. There are touches of oak spice. There are slightly dusty touches as well. And maybe a little bit of sort of forest floor, dried leaves notes. But actually, it's that sort of very classic earthiness that is currently dominating the nose. So let's have a taste, shall we? Again, that earthy note comes through, but it's actually really beautifully married to some quite rich, ripe red fruit notes. Again, it's rich, plum, almost sort of plum jam sort of note. It's that sort of quite high ripeness, high toned plummy note, heading through towards a prune, maybe more sort of a stewed plum, that sort of note there. There are underlying touches of cedary oak, and that's adding a little bit of sort of delicate pepperiness as well, spice. The structure is nice and firm, fairly grainy, but it's not particularly drying. There is a ripeness and a suppleness to it that's stopping it from being astringent. And I think that's a really nice character of it. This is at the moment, I think it's in a rather restrained sort of status. The fruit is there, everything's balanced, it's beautiful, but I think the fruit here will open out a little more. I think this is a wine that's got 3 or 4 years before it sort of reaches its peak, and probably has 3 or 4 more years after that. You could probably keep it up to 10 years quite happily, and it will start to open out, show a more developed bouquet, show its fruit a little more to the fore, and some of those earthy notes will start to become a little bit sort of, I suppose, truffle notes, mushroom notes, and they'll integrate with the spices a bit more. I think this is a wine that, as I say, it's at a nice place at the moment. It's nicely balanced, but it's got more to offer in the future. So that was Beau Site 2016 from Saint Estephe. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please do like and share it with your friends. Do follow us on YouTube. We'd love to have more people following us. We'd love to hear your comments. If you'd like to leave those below, that would be fabulous to know what you think as well. But most importantly, I do hope you'll be able to make the time to join us again for another tasting very soon. Goodbye now.